Well, my name is Rick Feldstein. I'm the Napa Court Superior Executive Officer. Although I thought about going to law school, I never did. So I'm a court
I thought you were a lawyer. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for joining us. We didn't have you initially on it, so I really appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. So this is a form that was initially developed to be a kind of a starting point for courts throughout the state. It's not a mandated form and such. Courts have taken this and modified it throughout the state, as well as counties who are in charge of their collections program, and hopefully simplified it, made it easier to read. I think some of your criticisms are quite valid, but I think the intent here was not necessarily to have a finished product. It was only to have, here's the types of things your form needs to include, and the sort of content, and courts can take it and make it more user-friendly, as you say. And don't forget, too, that these forms are generally not filled out in a vacuum. For example, I can speak with Napa. They would come to our collections officer. They would sit down with the person. They could ask the sorts of questions that you've asked here. The person could explain what these various things mean. And you're absolutely right. A lot of this stuff is required by the legislation itself, keep in mind as well, in terms of some of the legalese and such. So I think your points are well taken. I think courts are aware of trying to make forms more user-friendly, and I can't speak for all 58 courts and counties throughout the state, but I would strongly suspect that if you went out there, they are more user-friendly than this sample that was put out
I know,
at the
but
beginning.
come on, man. Let's just be honest. I get that, and you're a gentleman, and I appreciate it. But the truth of the matter, it's not defensible to me. This is our government saying this is a form and you guys can change it. Why can't we make it better? You know, I can give this to some a millennial and hand it to them, and they'll give me back something. Now, we may have some problems with respect to some of the language as to how it's written in terms of the law, and that's our mistake, okay? I'm with you on that. But things like I'm a person in good standing, I don't, where does that come from, Mike? Mr. Hobbs, you know?
The legislation.
It does come from the, yes, it comes
says
from the.
good standing?
Yes, it's a
It
requirement.
means you're not negative, that you've been making your payments and that you're current in your
Right.
payments.
But in truth,
That's the point of it, in
Well,
good
why
standing.
can't we just say I'm a current on my payments?
It was not defined in statute.
What?
It's not defined in statute. So the statute just says good standing, so it's a little bit unclear what does that mean.
and in fact, this has been an issue of dispute and ambiguity in the way that the law has gotten applied, because it's not clear from one county to another what good standing means or what current means. So, yeah, this clearly could have been more well clarified, and actually something that we're thinking about trying to fix for next year, and we may need to.
I take out the may out of that.
And, sure. And, you know, I would just go back to this, one of the statements about from CSAC, that this is a new program, very early in the process, was implemented under a very, very tight time frame, in a matter of weeks, and based upon legislation that changed throughout the process until right before it was actually implemented. And I'm sure a lot of this stuff, and again, your suggestions are very valid and I think useful, but keep in mind it's a work in progress, and I think a lot of the things will be made clearer as these things happen. We gain further experience. You know, courts really do try and be very user-friendly as much as we can. It is a challenge. You know, we're involved with the law, a complicated manner, but we really do work very hard to make things plain and simple for people and to allow the best service possible. So just keep in mind that this is a work in progress, that this was not meant to be a finished product. It was simply meant to be a starting point, so we all didn't start from 58 different places. And I think there are a lot of efforts to make this a simpler project.
Ms. Castro, can we, I want to get you to have a copy of this document and get your comments to come to the Judicial Council and to our committee so you can kind of run it through your thinking in terms of folks who are older drivers to get some ideas, font size, some of the basic ideas that you have. That might be helpful in terms of getting your input on this. Yes, sir.
I would also say just the reading level.
Right.
And understanding who this client base is that is applying for this. We're seeing a very substantial number of people who are applying for the low-income portion of this program, which generally means we've probably got people with a high school diploma, perhaps even lower.
That's right.
Their reading levels may be lower. So we need to make sure this is understandable to them. The other thing that strikes me about the form, and I know it's available in another place, but if someone goes into the court's office, what documents will they need to have in their possession that day for them to be effective, to be actually be able to get through the process? And so I think, you know, having this in a form, and you know, we advise our clients to go to the DMV, get a printout of their record so that they know which violations they have in multiple counties. And if you don't, and if you don't mind, back on this issue of multiple counties, You know, one thing that we think is a potential solution is that in the state, there are two major vendors who actually do much of the collections work, Alliance One and GC Services. Through their databases, they should be able to check in other counties if that person comes to their window and says, I'm in LA County, I'm GC Services. GC Services should check other counties. And then we should be able to figure out a way in one step to clear all of those license holes under that vendor. Now, it still may require some folks to go to an additional county that's not under GC Services, but it does seem like we could use the technology in a wiser way than we currently are to reach out to folks and try to take care of more of these multiple county holes. So,
Can I start out with what you start out with is the idea of what do I need to bring with me and where am I going? I didn't read in detail as I should have all the forms that you guys have, but it goes to what Ms. Castro was saying, which is and it's not just a senior, it's everybody. What documents do I need to take with me, right, to get my driver's license back?
I think I can speak to
Do we
that.
have that?
I can tell you
Okay.
exactly, and really you don't need to bring very much. Because if you're going to the court, they have a record of what your cases are, assuming it's their jurisdiction, and what their payment history has been and such. They can normally look that up, hopefully through electronic records in most cases. In terms of the other hurdles that need to be addressed, such as the warrants or the restitution, again, courts have those records. I can tell you both when we implemented the amnesty program last time as well as this time, we went through our database for all cases to determine do they have restitution owed, do they have a warrant, and flag those cases that truly are. So we can tell folks that exact information should they come there. And that sort of effort is probably one of the more time-consuming efforts in many counties, because oftentimes when you have restitution involved, warrants involved, you have other county agencies, and there needs to be tremendous coordination. But I think courts have done a very good job in terms of identifying those people that are eligible without putting a great burden on them.
But shouldn't you, I want you to walk us through the process in a minute, how this works, but in that regard, I'm nervous. Anytime I have to deal with government and I'm worried about my license or a ticket or I'm gonna get arrested or what does this mean, I'm nervous. I'm worried. I'm uncomfortable. Someone has a piece of paper, this is my paperwork, right? They're not used to that stuff. So so what you want to say is, if in fact that's the case, look, you only need to bring this because the court records will have this, this, and this, and this. And you should make sure that you ask the person you talk to about these things. Do I have something in the counties? Do I have this? They will check the court records. In other words, what you just said is brilliant. It's exactly right. It's just, I need to know that to have a comfort level before I walk in the door, because I'm scared what's going to happen.
Senator Hertzberg?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Please.
One of the things, we did a survey and reached out to many of the counties who are doing this to ask them what they're seeing. And a lot of the time, these are people who have been what we might call frequent flyers through the system. This is not their first time coming down to the court or to the county to pay their fees. They've had past due tickets in the past. They've been on payment plans in the past and have come off them. They've had their license revoked, reinstated,
Right.
and revoked and reinstated. So they're familiar with the process.
Okay.
And so the counties, and I know the courts as well, are happy to have another thing to pull them in and to hold on to them and get them back on a payment plan. And that's why having the license is a really good idea. Boards of supervisors across the state agree that there's no real good point of revoking someone's license. It just pushes them to break the law and drive without a license or lose their job. But one of the problems with the traffic amnesty program is that one of the sticks have been taken away. And that is one of the concerns we have, is that we bring people in all the time. We reach out and we try to get people, and we walk through this form with them. So somebody may get the form, but Mike has people in every county, I think, who knows they walk in and they either have someone from the court or someone from the county working with them and walking through the form, asking these questions. It's a guide for the staff as much as it is for the people who are coming into the program. But the problem is for us is that once somebody's license is reinstated, and CSAC does not have a position whether that should be something that should be pulled or not later if somebody doesn't keep their payment plan, but that's one of our concerns. You know, this was a budget this was done through the budget because there's supposed to be money coming into different accounts. What we're seeing is very little money coming in because we're doing very low, $25, I think is the lowest that I've heard of as a payment plan a month. So people are starting these payment plans, and so the money isn't coming in. And one of the things we're monitoring and working with the Judicial Council on is, are people going to continue making their payments once they get their driver's license back? And so as you talk about the concerns about multi-county, which I would love to figure out solutions to that, because I think we want to get people to a point where they can use this program, pay their debt off, get their license back, and have this behind them. But the problem becomes, what happens when they stop paying their payment
Wage
plan?
garnishment, we put a hook in the bill. Well, right now, you don't, what's happening
We
is
currently have wage garnishment opportunities, but a lot of times these people don't, they've got so many orders
You
on
say
top of
wage-
it.
No, come on, please. You got 10 billion, this is ridiculous. This is government talking to government, doing nothing. Please, just, it's like ridiculous. This is why you have $10 billion of unpaid debt, right? Obviously, the idea of going out to people and saying you have this debt is illusory. It doesn't make a difference, right?
Well-
So, hold on.
Okay.
Second thing is, I don't know, have you ever done a wage garnishment in your life before? Have you ever done
No,
it?
thank
Okay.
goodness.
Well, let me tell you, it's not an easy process. And the fact of the matter is, now that people sign up and give their information and make this promise, the truth of the matter is it's going to be a lot easier for government to collect those dollars than what they currently have. Of course you have wage garnishment available, but it's another illusory concept, because the cost of lawyers and all the people you got to engage in the process to even get it, to prove it, and do the stuff, versus now, ultimately, it's a better process in terms of getting the money. So it's not perfect, of course, and when you have folks that don't have any money and they're trying to get their licenses, of course that's an issue. But there is somewhat of an intelligence behind this process, better than what currently is the situation. Yeah.
Could I just add something to that? Let me put on my judicial counsel hat. I can tell you that the judicial branch, and particularly the Chief Justice, as well as all the judicial branch, judicial council members, are extremely concerned about this issue.
No question. The Chief Justice has been staggeringly cool on this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's unbelievable.
And I think you'll find that the branch is on board with the problems of people inability to pay and the size and the amounts of fines that are being imposed because of legislation and all sorts of other issues. But I think the balance to that is, if we're going to have court orders, there has to be a way to enforce them.
That's right.
Otherwise, no court, we shouldn't have them because it makes a sham of the judicial process. The question in my mind is, in talking with, for example, the Department of Child Support Services, which uses license support holds, and use it quite effectively, and don't drive people into poverty, which I think is a problem with their fines, but doesn't seem to be a problem for them. I think the question is, why can they do it and use it effectively? Why is it a problem for courts? And I think that's something we need to maybe look
What
at
do you
as a
think the
government.
answer is? What would your insight on that?
From what I understand, and again, I've not worked for DCSS, but just in talking with DCSS directors, they have the ability to impose a driver's license hold with a notice to a person saying, we're going to give you a certain, before we impose the hold, we're going to give you a certain amount of time to come in and clear up your problem. And then if they don't, they impose the hold. But if they come in after that, they can take the hold off. And that's something that courts and counties cannot do with traffic citations. So once we do it one time and take it off, you lose that ability to enforce it. So courts and counties in the past have been reticent to take it off until things are paid in full. But if we
one
could
of the
get
things
more,
that I was thinking about, just to cut to the chase on this, in terms of time, was, we've got this extraordinary problem, okay? These fees, it's out of control. Charging people $500 to $600 for these small little things. We have burdened folks in a way that is unreasonable, period. And we keep adding and adding, and every time we have a tough spot in the budget, we just say, go add another fee without having a sensitivity to what impacts it has on lives and people, okay? But we've now given a program that says, okay, start a payment program, you get your license back. I was thinking in terms of the real issue. In addition to that, there's two other things we need to do. We've done the amnesty. We've done the ability for people to go to court and have a hearing without having to pay money, which is ridiculous, right? You have to be rich to be able to have justice, which shouldn't be the case. Right. But then to decouple, in these minor cases, the fact that you lose your license. Now, what you're suggesting here is maybe that decoupling, meaning that, let's assume you fail to appear on a broken taillight. Should you lose your license because you didn't appear on a broken taillight? You should lose your license if you have drunk driving. I get that. Or if you're speeding 100 miles an hour. where there's a real rational relationship between your license. We had a situation where a fella would skip paying $1.50 on a metro rail. And this person lost her license and got thousands of dollars in fines because it kept cascading up. Should that person lose their license? I mean, we need to analyze that. You're right, you need an enforcement mechanism, and maybe it works in child support collection cases. But I think as we drill in this issue, we need to determine, are there cases where it's appropriate to say you shouldn't lose your license? And then the second thing, which is the most important thing, and it's going to be the most difficult because it costs so much money, is the idea of reducing these fines to something that's reasonable. You know, should you lose your livelihood because you went 5 miles an hour over the limit, right? The answer is no. What is that? What should those costs be? We're seeing these huge fines. They're just insane. They're just ridiculous. Now, that's our fault at government, where we need to basically write a check to pay for government services rather than making people pay them through fines. And we're going to have to revisit that.
Go ahead. I think you make some valid points. The only thing I would add to that is, yes, maybe there are certain things you should not use your license for, but there's a whole range in between of running stop signs and all sorts of things that can be very serious. And if somebody truly has the ability to pay and are basically scoffing at the system, yeah, maybe they should lose their driver's license. But we should have the ability to either take it off or put it back on as they either comply or don't comply, which is a tool we just don't have right now.
But for people who have the ability to pay, the wage garnishment should be an effective tool. I think the problem becomes for our clients where they're low income and they, even if, as Darby says, they may have, they may have wage garnishment orders already pending. Well, they're poor. They just don't have the money. Right. And I think it's just simply unrealistic to think that we're going to create a perfect mousetrap that's going to capture money from people who don't have money.
Right.
And so I think this notion of potentially decoupling many of the offenses that, I mean, I think the example of the person who didn't pay their metro fee, I mean, why does that end up in a license suspension?
It's ridiculous.
And there are many, many, many examples like that. And I think the hard cases will be something that's between speeding and somewhat of a public safety violation.
Why don't you just give a judge discretion in that regard?
You know,
Right, and so that was, I wanted to clarify that.
Please.
Because that once there's a failure to pay, then there is no discretion.
Right, that's the point.
The statute requires the courts have to report it to DMV, and then, DMV has statutory requirements as well. So that would need
so everybody says that's the law. And then it gets worse, because what happens is you go out and we contract this stuff out with people, and the court says, oh, well, you owe all this money. I can't waive it because it's a contract with a private agency that gets a fee for the fine, right? And they can't waive that. And that just cascades, in what happens. So the whole thing makes no sense. But if maybe you had certain kinds of offenses where there was decoupled, and certain kinds where it was mandatory, but then in the middle, where you have this close question, Mr. Harold, is the discretion of the judge. Judge has to make a finding, and the judge can make a determination as this is a case that requires a driver's license to be lost, and maybe that's a fair, administration of justice.
Yeah. Let me go back to wage garnishments for just for a second. They can be effective, but you have to understand there is a lot of information a court would need to have to implement one. You have to know where they work. You have to have their social security number. You have to know their bank accounts and such. And with a traffic citation, that information in many cases is simply not available to pursue that. So there has to be something besides wage garnishment.
And we may learn lessons from the amnesty program, because we're actually now requiring, as part of the application to get amnesty, that you have to provide that information. It's authorized by statute. And so that may be something that we want to look at as we go forward, is whether or not that becomes a standard procedure to collect from those with the ability to pay, so that the garnishment order can be effectuated more quickly. I think that's something we should definitely consider.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I just make one clarification on the reporting of unpaid tickets to DMV? I believe it's discretionary on the court whether or not they provide DMV with an FTA or FTP. However, when DMV receives an FTA or an FTP, we're mandated by the Vehicle Code to either impose a hold on the license if there's only one FTA or FTP reported. If there's multiple, we're mandated by the Vehicle Code to impose a suspension. So my understanding is that the court does have discretion on reporting FTAs or FTPs to DMV, but once it is reported, we're mandated by the Vehicle Code to impose the action.
And I would note also that the court also has the discretion on failures to pay about making a determination about whether or not that failure to pay was willful under state law. And I think we heard this in Washington, D.C. at the White House thing that we both attended, and Corey was there too, that many times the judges are simply, there's so many people in their courtrooms, they're not making that determination of willfulness. So there actually is, so maybe your construct where there's some stuff that we kind of narrowed down the kind of things that judges have to use discretionary powers on. But making that determination of willfulness is really important, because for our clients, when they can't pay, that's not willful.
And I can tell you, there is a lot of discretion that's exercised, maybe not as much as we would like to see, perhaps, but that's certainly open for discussion. But let me kind of walk you through the process, for example, in my court,
Please.
as to how it might be
That would
helpful.
be good.
So if I get a traffic ticket, there's a date to appear. And that's my first notice that I need to take care of this. They come down to the court and deal with it. They can do it online. They can come down in person. We do try and make that as user-friendly as possible. We do go beyond, and most courts do, I believe, go beyond that and send a courtesy notice. And in fact, in Napa, for example, we extend that date to appear, which is 30 days.
And are
another
all those
several
notices
weeks.
done with U.S. Mail Service?
Yes.
Do you require, the citations, I haven't got a ticket in a long time, do the officers ask you for your email address now?
I don't believe that they do. I've not seen it. But that's a good point. Doing it more electronically, absolutely. But we are working with the mail system, so we do extend that failure to appear date beyond the date that's on the citation to give people more time.
But can I back up with you a little bit on that
Sure.
before you start that? Because you're at the Judicial Council, and I have sat now with the California Highway Patrol, and I asked them how the process works.
Right.
And here's what happens, okay? This is the way they told me it works. The officer comes in at the end of the day and gives their traffic book and takes their stuff and puts it in an inbox in the in tray at the CHP office. Some clerk, some individual who's there periodically, at least once a week, takes all those invitations and mails them to a central location in the mail. In the mail. A big packet of these things that go in the mail. If the mail is lost, which we have learned it has been, the big packet of stuff, those people are in trouble because there's a problem with notification. Then it goes to a central place. Those central notifications, or those handwritten notices, which all aren't exactly accurate, are then hand put into a master database. Right? Sometimes the delay is so significant that you can't get the notification out to the person, and they go to court because the officer's told what dates to write down, and they go to court and there's no record because they haven't put in the system yet. So when you talk about that, when we look at the customer experience of what someone has, how that system actually works, that's what happens. Because I met with the people and I said, walk me through it. You're then at the point of, okay, a citation's notice and issued, but there's a whole front end of that process that's a little arcane.
Yeah, and I think you've raised some good points, and I'm glad you did. I can tell you many courts are going to more modern case management systems, but we need more funding for doing so. But we are taking our initiative to do so ourselves. And in addition to that, that opens up new opportunities to expedite those sorts of processes. So I can tell you, for example, in Napa, those citations are hand-delivered. They're not mailed several times a week. We image them daily. They go out to a service that does that data input. They don't wait, and they're back within 24 hours. And then it goes to our noticing center, and those forms are sent out immediately. So we've really shrunk down that time, and that's why we also give, knowing that those sorts of human errors do occur, we do give that extra time beyond the date to appear on the citation to address that.
Have you done a pilot project of electronic tickets where if I'm an officer and I could certainly have an electronic device, whatever it is, I can give a ticket right there, I can have the person verify it, give me your email, I can hit send, and then just like when I order a book online from a company, it says, thank you for your order, you ordered the book, right? This says, we just got the ticket and here it is, and now it's in the system instantaneously. It verifies the information, please verify this. You hit the verification button, and now someone has it, and then the court can give you notifications, keep you up on top of it in an electronic manner that is comfortable for the person, it works for them.
There are counties that are going to that process exactly, where they're electronic tickets.
Which ones?
Well, I know in Sacramento, now I don't qualify for the traffic amnesty program, but I do get my fair share of parking tickets. And I have to tell you, I have never not gotten the notice that I have a parking ticket, ever.
In the mail or
Yeah, in the
electronically?
mail.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, Sacramento is one of those counties that is doing it electronic, and if you try to fight a ticket, they have pictures and they do the whole thing. And so I think they are moving to that. Again, it costs it takes funding. But I think, and when we bring it back to the traffic amnesty program, I think it's really, there are people who just have failed to pay or have failed to deal with their problem. And whether it is a cost because they are low income or because they've just failed to, it is something we're trying to really address. And I know that we've worked closely with Mike on the other ideas. I guess my concern in trying to figure out solutions to the problems is that we've only been in the amnesty program for 3 months. And so I do think that time has to go to see how people adjust, to see if that level of interest maintains. I could tell you CSAC gets calls every day on people in Sacramento for that they have traffic and they need to know how to access traffic amnesty. My voicemail is blown up quite a few times based on that. So we're trying to
I
get
didn't
that.
know anybody knew what CSAC was.
Well, I know, neither did I. But they're calling. And so, I also want to I want to get back to this specific to the traffic amnesty, because I do feel the Judicial Council has done videos. They have really done outreach. CSAC has participated in monthly calls and weekly while we were developing the process to make sure that everything was user-friendly. We have done calls with the California Recovery Officers Association to make sure that if people have questions about collections and how they're doing it. But one of the biggest things that have come out of this, because you talked about that $10 billion outstanding debt, was that counties have talked about how they have debt on their books from 1970 and that they've never gone through and kind of cleared out past due debt. And one of the things we've been talking to them about is you have to do that because it's not likely you're going to collect that debt anymore. And so bringing the traffic amnesty back and having this 2-year period of doing it has brought more attention on that past due debt, what is collectible, what is not. I think a lot of people think the debt that you are collecting on through the traffic amnesty is collectible debt. But we're going to be able to get it and look at the past debt, and I think that number may come down because of it as well.
Can I just say that I think Darby makes a fair point that we are only 3 months into this new program, and frankly, the fact that we're even able to turn this around in a 3-month period from the time the budget passed to the time that October 1 came around, really was us working very strong and fast. And the truth is, as we sit here today, we have clients who've already got their license back. So there are lots of things to pick at here, but there's also a lot of good happening.
That's right.
And I don't want to lose that, and I don't want to sound like we're just being a critic of this, because we absolutely are not. And I would also acknowledge that we do have open communication. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to Corey. I've also been talking to Darby. We've had meetings together with our staff and our advocates to work through problems. So there's we are trying to fix these problems. But some of the things you're hearing about today, I think, are more at the level of policy problems and policy issues that the legislature really needs to take a look at. And what we've really done in the last 12 months is we kind of have exposed a system out there that's not really working as well as it could for folks. I think this example of people getting their notices quickly, well, we had a witness at a hearing earlier this year who supposedly ran a red light in an intersection with a red light camera. Well, that person had moved, they'd become homeless, the DMV or the county sent the notice to the old address. Person didn't even know they'd ever gotten a ticket. And so then one day they get pulled over and they find out that their license has been suspended and they got arrested because there was a bench warrant because for their failure to respond. So, there are gaps in the system. There are things that are occurring to everyday people out there that we do need to take a look at. And it's complicated and it's not simple. And our clients aren't angels. No one's saying they are. It's going to be something I think this legislature is going to have to continue to go down the path of digging into and looking at and trying to make more rational sense out of.
That's right. You're 100% right, Mr. Harold. And we need to be diligent. And I think and I do appreciate it. And I am sensitive to the time. And I absolutely thank you for the work. But just the idea is to stay on top of it. If this was you know, I just think already, just from today, what we learned in terms of what the DMV is doing, in terms of holes in the forms, in terms of ideas that we can share. That's the purpose of this process, to engage as we start the next legislative session, what we need to fix. Certainly Senator Hancock and Senator De Leon have been communicating with Judicial Council and with, who was the other group they wrote a letter to? I can't recall. LAO with respect to ideas which we can then share here as a result of today. They have an interest, of course, in trying to deal with this. I think this issue of trying to determine how to decouple the minor infractions from the license, how do you figure this stuff out? This sheds a light on these types of things, which I think is one of the important aspects of the legislative branch of government. One of the challenges that I certainly have been frustrated with over the years, and in my former job, we did the oversight in a significant way, and certainly the leadership of this House is doing the same thing now, is that you know, we pass things and we don't really follow up on them, and we, you know, it all sounds good because you get a press release and you know, get your name in the paper because you're, you know, curing cancer and making you look skinny act. But the truth of the matter is, did you cure cancer and are you skinnier? You know, and does this really work? And our job is to stay on top of this and to be vigilant in this regard, and to, you know, I mean, like I think the fact that the AARP will engage with us and help us understand to make this form work. The fact that I now am, you know, someone who's involved can engage in this, and I'm going to push on this, that we can further ask these questions and legislatively, if it's necessary, correct this. I think, quite frankly, the idea of good standing is pushing it a little bit. You know, the idea of good standing can be interpreted as certainly what they mean is that you're up to date on your bills. Writing the word good standing in here is, to me, is whoever wrote this word is a chicken way out of trying to say, well, that's what it said, right? It doesn't really capture the meaning. And someone says, well, I use those words. Give me a break. I'm sorry. And this is one of the mistakes that we do in government. It's plausible deniability. It's covering your behind. It's like, okay, it's good, but you're not really, in truth, in fact, getting to the essence of people and customer service. And if you were a company, that would change. If you were in some other form, it would change. But in government, you can cover your behind on it. And so, and I just don't think that's the standard we have to live by. The lesson of this hearing today is that technology is moving at a breakneck speed, that the folks that we work with and that we represent their experience in their lives are changing dramatically by virtue of what's happening externally in their lives outside of government. We have to be as sensitive and as urgent as to how we do stuff. So having a hearing a few months after the bill passes would be no less than all of us internally of saying, okay, how we doing? Let's stay on top of it, and sending the message that there's a new day and we're going to ride this thing closely and we're going to correct mistakes and we'll be available to fix this. I'm not trying to be accusatory. I'm just trying to figure it out and fix it and be helpful in a way where this branch of government can do that. Any other thoughts from anybody else? This is, you know, it's a little, what's the word I'm thinking about? Non-traditional about how we would conduct. This is like the old Steve Peace days where we engage in a conversation, you know, for those who remember Senator Peace, who I'm going to see later in this week. But I think it's helpful in the sense that we get to the bottom of it as opposed to just presentation after presentation and engage the group in a discussion. So look, I appreciate this, you guys. You're clearly working your heart out. And I love the intercommunication and the learning of lessons. I certainly want to reach out to those counties, if you can tell me, and thank them who've been creative. LA County, what they did, Mendocino and other counties, Napa, thank you, and other things that you've done. So really appreciate it. Any further, I know I'll get public, anything further? Mr. Bedard, you have a question?
I mean, we could have A/B tested this, right?
Yeah, I just want you to know, I'm going to the DMVs. I've got some interns in my office, and one of the things I love to do, I did this on a number of things, I send out them as film crews, and to do, you know, just walk in and say, how's it going? And if we get some interesting comments, we'll send you the videos. Just to get a sense. It's a good project for the kids to get out there and see how government interfaces with people. We did this on the amnesty program. Like, you know, we saw people in LA having to drive from San Francisco with their paperwork, stuff that was just dumb, to try to get, okay, person on the street will, you know, see what it looks like. Anything further, anybody else? Mike, thank you so much. You guys have been great. And any public comment on this? Chairwoman Dion Aaron, do you have anything to say? All right, everybody. Thank you so very much. Meeting is adjourned.